Teachers who dated students' dad. How did you react when school fired you? Story 1. I teach 10th grade English, and I'm normally the queen of boundaries. Then Colton's dad showed up to parent night with that, I brought the sign-in sheet and also emotional stability energy. West, divorced. Polite, the kind of man who says thank you to the copier. He emailed after, thanks for looking out for Colton. He's had a rough year. I replied like a professional. He replied like a grateful parent. Then he asked if I knew a good local therapist. Then we were talking about books. Then we were laughing about how teenagers communicate exclusively through sighs. I kept telling myself, we're two adults, he's not my student, I'm careful. We didn't even hold hands in public. We went to a restaurant 2 towns over like we were hiding a federal crime. Colton figured it out anyway. One Monday, he walked into class, saw Wes's name pop up on my phone. Wes, tonight, and his face turned the color of a fire alarm. He didn't say anything. Not to me. Not at first. 2 weeks later, the principal called me in during my planning period. HR was there. My union rep wasn't. That's how I knew it was bad. Miss Hargrove, the principal said, voice soft like he was about to put down a family pet. We received a complaint alleging an inappropriate relationship with a student's parent, and that it's impacting the student. I laughed. Actually laughed. He's 39. I'm 32. The student is not involved. HR slid a folder across the table. Screenshots. A photo of Wes and me at the restaurant, grainy like Bigfoot footage. A note from Colton's mom. She's humiliating my child. She's grooming him through his father. I went cold. That's insane. It may be, HR said. But perception matters. The student reports feeling targeted in class. I stared at them. Targeted? Colton hasn't turned in a single essay since October. I've been begging him to pass. The principal looked down. He also says you called him lazy in front of the class. I didn't. I called the behavior lazy after he literally said he didn't feel like doing school anymore. But none of that mattered. They'd already decided what story they liked. I was put on administrative leave that afternoon. By Friday, they fired me for conduct unbecoming, even though their policy said dating a parent wasn't forbidden. Just strongly discouraged. Strongly discouraged apparently means we'll sacrifice you to make the emails stop. Wes showed up at my apartment with flowers and a face full of guilt. Colton's mom pushed this, he said. She's furious I'm dating anyone. And your son? I asked. Wes swallowed. He said he didn't mean for you to get fired. I opened my laptop and looked at the school's statement. We prioritize student well-being. My name wasn't even included. Just a staff member has been released. I didn't cry until I realized the worst part. I didn't lose my job because I did something illegal. I lost it because a teenager got embarrassed and adults chose the easiest target. 2 months later, I got a job at a private tutoring center. Same work, half the politics, and no hallway rumors. Wes tried to make it work with me, but every time I saw a father-daughter event flyer, I felt my stomach twist. The relationship didn't survive the scandal. But my lesson did. Schools don't fire you for what you did. They fire you for what they're afraid people will say you did. Story 2. I was the fun science teacher. Lab days, playlists, stupid mnemonics, the whole thing. The last person anyone expected to become a staff meeting cautionary tale. Then I met Mr. Ramirez, my student Maya's dad, during a field trip permission slip disaster. He came to the office in his work boots, hair still wet like he'd sprinted from a job site, apologizing like he'd personally broken the printer. Thank you for not giving up on her, he said. She says you're the only class she doesn't hate. That should have been the end of it. A sweet parent moment. Instead, he left his number, in case there's ever an emergency. And the next week, there was an emergency. Maya ran away for 3 hours after fighting with her mom. He called me because he didn't know who else to call. I talked Maya down from behind the gym like a hostage negotiator. Afterward, her dad just stood there, shaking, whispering, I didn't know I could be this scared. That night he texted, I owe you. Dinner? As thanks. I wrote back, that's not appropriate. Then I stared at my phone for an hour and typed, coffee is fine. We did everything right. Off campus. No school talk. No Maya around. I told myself it was a clean line. Until Maya saw us. It was Saturday, downtown, a bookstore cafe. Maya walked in, froze, and her eyes went huge like she'd just discovered her teacher was a spy. Her dad stood up too fast. Mija, she backed away. Are you dating? No, I said instantly, too loud, like I was guilty of something. We're just talking. Maya sprinted out. Her dad chased her. I sat there, palms sweating, watching strangers read novels like my life wasn't imploding. Monday, Maya came to class and didn't look at me. Tuesday, she forgot her notebook. Wednesday, she accused me of giving her a lower grade because you're mad at me. I wasn't mad. I was terrified. I started triple-checking every comment on her assignments, every tone in my voice, every word I said within 10 feet of her. Then the counselor called me in, not with concern, more like with a script. Maya says she feels uncomfortable. She says it's like you're inserting yourself into her family. I felt my face burn. I'm not inserting. Her father asked for support during a crisis. The counselor nodded, but her eyes didn't. Parents are already talking. By Friday, the principal asked me for my badge. I'm being fired? I asked, because my brain couldn't accept it. Not fired, he said quickly. We're ending your contract early. Because I had coffee with a parent? Because the student's learning environment has been compromised. I wanted to scream. So the solution is to remove the teacher who actually helps her? He wouldn't meet my eyes. We have to protect the school. Translation: protect the school from gossip, lawsuits, and angry Facebook moms. The worst part? Maya left me a note in my mailbox 2 weeks later. No return address. I didn't want you to get in trouble. I just didn't want my dad to love someone else. That sentence crushed me more than losing my job. Because it was honest, and because it proved what I'd suspected. She didn't hate me. She was scared. And the adults punished the wrong person to make the fear go away. Story 3. I didn't date the dad at first. I avoided him like he was a student with a vape pen. Because I knew how it would look. Young female teacher, single dad, drama. But Ethan's father, Kevin, was impossible to avoid. He volunteered for everything. Fundraisers, field day, fixing the broken stage curtains. He was the kind of parent the PTA writes poems about. Ethan, meanwhile, was the kind of kid who looked happy in photos but flinched when you raised your voice. He had a mom not in the picture, and a home life that felt like a missing puzzle piece. One day after class, Ethan asked me quietly, "Do you think dads can get tired of their kids?" I said, "Dads can get tired. But good dads don't stop loving." He nodded like I'd handed him oxygen. Kevin emailed later. "Ethan says you said something that helped him. Thank you. I don't know what I'm doing half the time." And that's how it started. Not romance. Just two adults trying to keep a kid afloat. Then Kevin's truck died in the school parking lot, and I gave him a jump. Then he insisted on buying me lunch as repayment. Then we started texting about lesson plans and car batteries and stupid memes. We went out exactly twice before the rumor machine ate us alive. Someone saw us at a local diner. Someone else heard we were sleeping together in my classroom. By the next week, I was hearing my own life as fan fiction. And then Ethan's grandmother showed up. She stormed into the office like she owned the building, demanded to speak with the principal, and pointed at me through the glass like I was a criminal. "That woman is poisoning my grandson," she shouted. "She's trying to replace his mother." The principal pulled me into a conference room. HR again. Always HR. "Miss Dalton," HR said, "we need to ask, are you in a relationship with a student's parent?" "Yes," I said. "Outside of school. Consensual. He's not my student anymore. Ethan moved to another class 2 months ago." The principal's eyes widened. "You reassigned him?" "I requested it," I said. "To avoid exactly this." HR sighed like I'd inconvenienced her. "Unfortunately, the family is alleging you orchestrated the reassignment to facilitate the relationship." I stared. "That makes no sense." "They're also alleging grooming behavior toward Ethan," HR continued, tone robotic, "through emotional manipulation." My mouth went dry. "What? I'm his teacher. I comfort kids. That's literally the job." The principal leaned forward. "Did you ever say you loved Ethan?" "No." "Did you ever hug him?" "Once. When his dog died." Silence. The kind that makes you realize your normal human actions have been rebranded as evidence. They suspended me pending investigation. Kevin promised he'd fight it. His mother promised she'd destroy me. Then came the nail in the coffin. Ethan told the counselor he felt weird and wanted me gone. Kevin cried when he told me. "He didn't mean it like that," he said. "He's being pressured." But it didn't matter what Ethan meant. It mattered what the school could write in a letter. Student expressed discomfort. They fired me to avoid liability. Kevin showed up at my door the next day with a lawyer's card and a desperate plan. "We can sue." I looked at him and realized something awful. Even if I won, I'd still be the teacher who dated a student's dad. The internet doesn't care about nuance. Parents don't care about context. They care about storylines. So I didn't sue. I took a job at a different district under my maiden name. Kevin and I tried to keep dating, but every time my phone buzzed with a school email, I felt sick. Eventually, he said, "I can't keep choosing between you and my son," and I understood. The school didn't just fire me. It made me a problem everyone had to solve by removing me. Story 4. I was 35, and I'd sworn off dating after a spectacularly humiliating breakup with a fellow teacher who cheated with, of course, another teacher. So when I started seeing my student Lila's dad, it wasn't some reckless, forbidden romance. It was two lonely adults texting after midnight about how hard life is. Lila's dad, Jonah, was a substitute firefighter with a schedule that made friendship difficult, let alone parenting. Lila had anxiety and a habit of vomiting before tests. I'd been working with her for months. Breathing exercises, extra time, gentle encouragement. One day, Jonah showed up early to pick her up and caught me kneeling next to Lila's desk, helping her through a panic spiral. He didn't flirt. He didn't act charming. He looked relieved, like someone finally saw his kid. "I don't know how to thank you," he said. So I made a mistake. I said, "You don't have to, but maybe stop blaming yourself." His eyes got glossy. That was the moment the line blurred. Not because I wanted him, but because I saw how tired he was. We started meeting for late coffee after his shifts. We kept it secret. We thought we were being respectful. Then Lila found out. Not from catching us, from her mom. Her mom, Brianna, cornered me at a school event with a smile so sharp it could cut glass. "So," she said, "you're sleeping with my ex." I nearly choked. "I'm not." "Oh, don't play saint," she said, loud enough for nearby parents to stare. "You're the teacher. The trusted adult. The one who tells my kid to be brave while you're blowing up her family." My heart slammed. "This has nothing to do with Lila. Everything is about Lila," she snapped. "And if you cared about her, you'd stay away from him." The next week, Lila stopped coming to my classroom for extra help. She started crying during attendance. She wrote on an assignment, "I hate this." I tried to talk to her privately with the counselor present. Lila whispered, "If you date my dad, my mom says she'll take me away from him." That sentence rewired my entire body. The counselor's face changed. Not sympathy, calculation. 2 days later, HR called me in. "Miss Sandoval," they said, "it's come to our attention you're involved with a student's parent and it has created a hostile environment." "A hostile environment?" I repeated. "For who?" "For the student," HR said. "She is distressed." I wanted to scream. She's distressed because her parents are using her like a rope in a tug of war. But HR didn't want truth. HR wanted containment. They offered me a choice: resign quietly or be terminated. If I resigned, they'd give a neutral reference. I asked, "Is this even against policy?" "It's against good judgment," the principal said, like that was a law. So I resigned. Jonah was furious. He wanted to go public, defend me, expose Brianna's threats. I told him no, because if we fought, Lila would be the battlefield, and I refused to let my love story become her trauma. We broke up 2 weeks later, not because we stopped caring, but because the school made our relationship a weapon. Last I heard, Lila switched schools. Jonah moved out of town. Brianna posted vague Facebook statuses about protecting her daughter, and I learned the cruelest truth of teaching. Sometimes you can do everything right for a kid and still get punished for being human. Story 5. I got fired on my birthday. Not even kidding. I walked into school with cupcakes for my colleagues, wearing the safe dress I reserved for parent conferences. And by lunch, my classroom keys were in an envelope. The reason? I was dating Tyler's dad. Tyler was a senior. I taught art. Tyler's dad, Mark, ran a small framing shop and volunteered to help mount student work for the spring showcase. He was funny in a dry, understated way, like he'd learned to survive life by turning pain into one-liners. I didn't even know he was Tyler's dad at first. He introduced himself as Mark from Frameworks. We spent 2 afternoons stapling matboard and arguing about whether modern art is a prank. When I finally saw the last name on his volunteer badge match Tyler's, I froze. Mark shrugged. "Too late. You already told me your favorite movie is Pride and Prejudice." I can't unknow that. We tried to be responsible. We waited until after the showcase. We didn't tell anyone. We met at his shop after hours. We thought, no one gets hurt, no one needs to know. Then Tyler walked into Frameworks unexpectedly and saw me behind the counter laughing at something his dad said. Tyler didn't yell. He didn't cry. He just stared like I'd stolen his oxygen. Next day at school, he didn't show up to class. The day after that, his mom did. His mom marched into the front office, slammed her hand on the counter and said, "Your teacher is sleeping with my husband." The secretary looked like she wanted to evaporate. Within an hour, I was in the principal's office with HR. Cupcakes still untouched in the staff lounge. My birthday balloon bobbing in my classroom like a joke. "Miss Knox," HR began. "We have to address a serious allegation," I said. "He's separated." HR blinked. "That's not what we were told," because Mark hadn't actually signed the papers yet. He'd been working on it, which meant, in the school's eyes, I wasn't dating a parent. I was part of an affair. Mark called me at 9:47 a.m., voice shaking. She found out. She's furious. She's saying you pursued me to get Tyler special treatment. Tyler is failing, I hissed. I literally emailed you about his missing work. That email is in her hands now, Mark whispered. HR slid printed copies of my email across the table like it was evidence in a murder trial. Tyler needs to turn in his portfolio. He can still pass if it looked awful in black and white, like I was negotiating grades through his father. I tried to explain. I begged. I said, I never gave him a single advantage. If anything, I was harsher because I was terrified of this exact accusation. The principal pinched the bridge of his nose. This is a public high school. Parents will crucify us. So you'll crucify me instead, I said, before I could stop myself. Silence. They escorted me back to my classroom like I was radioactive. I packed my things while students watched through the door window, whispering. Someone filmed it. Of course they did. Tyler finally showed up as I was carrying a box of art supplies to my car. He stood on the sidewalk, hands in his pockets, eyes red. I didn't ask for this, he said. I know, I said softly. He swallowed. You were the only teacher who didn't treat me like my parents' divorce was my personality. That line hit me harder than the firing. Mark texted later, I'm leaving her for real. Please don't give up on us. But the damage was done. I was the scandal. The headline in a small town. The teacher who slept with a student's dad. I didn't reply. Because no relationship is worth being the reason a kid has to hear classmates say, yo, your teacher is your stepmom now. I ate my own birthday cupcake alone that night. It tasted like frosting and consequences. Story 6. I thought the worst part would be the firing. It wasn't. The worst part was the staff meeting before it happened, when everyone already knew and nobody would look me in the eye. It started with a harmless PTA volunteer, Mr. Choi, my student Mina's dad. Widower, gentle, always early, always carrying snacks for the kids like he was trying to patch the world with granola bars. We began talking after school about Mina's grief and how she'd shut down in class. He asked what books might help. I gave him a list. He actually read them. One night he texted, I finished that one. I cried. Is that normal? I answered. Then we talked. Then we kept talking. We didn't even touch for weeks. Just conversations that made me feel like I wasn't drowning in lesson plans and loneliness. Then Mina spotted us in my car after a parent-teacher night. Not kissing. Not anything. Just sitting there with the engine off, talking. Her face changed instantly, like she'd been punched. The next day, she told the counselor, she's trying to become my new mom. I requested a meeting with the counselor and Mina. I said, Mina, I'm not replacing anyone. I care about you. That's it. Mina burst into tears. If you date my dad, you'll leave too. That broke me. I ended it with Mr. Choi that same afternoon. I thought, if I step back, the kid feels safe. The school calms down. The school didn't calm down. A week later, HR called me in. We're hearing concerns about your judgment and professional boundaries. I said, I ended it. There is nothing happening. HR smiled like I was adorable. It happened. They fired me for the appearance of impropriety. No policy violation. No misconduct. Just the idea that parents might whisper. 2 months later, I ran into Mr. Choi at the grocery store. He looked exhausted. He said Mina still asks if I got in trouble because of her. I told him, no, adults made adult decisions. But the truth? Adults used a grieving kid's fear as a shield to protect their own reputations. Story 7. My first year teaching, I swore I'd never become that teacher. The one parent's side-eye. The one student's meme. The one whose name becomes a warning. Then I met Braden's dad. He was the basketball coach's assistant, always around campus, always helping. I didn't like him at first. Too confident, too comfortable. But he kept showing up to my classroom for art supplies because his son was in my elective and needed extra materials. He'd linger, making jokes, asking me about my weekend like we were co-workers. I shut it down until the day Braden's mom showed up screaming in the hallway, accusing the dad of cheating with somebody. Braden ran into my room shaking and hid behind the supply cabinet like he was 8, not 17. I stayed after school with him until his dad came. His dad looked wrecked. He said, I'm sorry you saw that. I'm sorry he saw that. That night the dad messaged me to thank me. I replied once, then twice. Then we were talking about how messy divorce makes kids. Then we were talking about life. We started dating quietly, off campus. No photos, no posts. It still exploded. Because Braden's mom didn't want a breakup. She wanted control. She emailed the school board with a subject line that might as well have been a bomb. Teacher having affair with student's father. The principal called me in while my students were taking a quiz. Is it true? He asked. like he wanted me to lie so he could pretend he didn't have to deal with it. It's not an affair, I said. They're separated. Legally? I hesitated. That was my mistake. I got suspended that day. Fired a week later. Meanwhile, the dad kept his campus job because he's not an employee in the same way. That's what HR told me. Like fairness has categories. The final punch? Braden posted on Instagram, guess my teacher wanted extra credit. Thousands of likes. He apologized later, privately. My mom told me to post it. She said it would make her stop. So yeah, I got fired. But what really ruined me was realizing a kid will set you on fire just to keep warm in his own family war. Story 8. I teach elementary school. People always imagine scandals happen with older kids. My scandal was about a third grader. Her name was Abby. She wore the same pink hoodie every day and drew pictures of her parents holding hands, even though they were divorced. Her dad, Nate, was the nice parent who always showed up on time and always asked, "Is she okay?" Like he expected bad news. One afternoon, Abby had a meltdown over a missing eraser and sobbed, "Mom says Dad doesn't care." I called Nate because he was the emergency contact. He rushed over, and when Abby finally calmed down, he sat in my classroom and whispered, "I don't know how to prove I love her. I should have ended it there. I should have been strictly professional." But that conversation stayed with me. Then he started emailing about Abby's reading. Then he asked if I knew a good child therapist. Then he asked if I'd ever want to grab coffee, just to talk about how to help her. I said yes, because I believed it was about Abby. It turned into more. Not fast, not dramatic, just two adults finding comfort where the world was loud. Abby found out when she saw me in her dad's kitchen making tea. She blinked, then smiled and said, "Are you going to be my stepmom?" I froze. "No, sweetie. I'm just your teacher." She shrugged. "Cool. Can you still help me with spelling?" I thought, if the kid is fine, it's fine. Her mom was not fine. Abby's mom showed up at school with her phone out, filming. "This is the woman sleeping with my ex," she shouted in the office. "Around my child." Parents stared. Staff went stiff. Abby's mom screamed that I was a predator, that I was targeting single dads, that I was stealing families. I was fired in 3 days. No investigation, just panic. The cruelest part? On my last day, Abby slipped a note into my hand. In messy pencil, it said, "I'm sorry my mom is mean. I still like spelling." I sat in my car and cried so hard I couldn't drive. Because the kid didn't ruin me. The adults did, using their child as a weapon and calling it protection. Story 9. When people hear teacher dated a student's dad, they imagine some secret, spicy romance. Mine was the least sexy thing ever. We bonded over laundry. My student Jared was always in the same wrinkled hoodie. He smelled like old smoke. He never had supplies. He acted tough, but his hands shook when he had to read aloud. One day I found out why. His dad, Pete, worked nights and slept days. Their dryer had been broken for months. Jared didn't tell anyone because it's nobody's business. I called Pete after school. I expected anger. Instead, he sounded embarrassed. "Yeah," he said. "I'm trying." The next day, Pete showed up with a bag of quarters and asked which laundromat was safest. I told him. He looked at me like I'd just saved his life. We started talking. Not flirting. Just two exhausted people trying to keep a kid afloat. Then one night, Pete texted, "Dryer's finally fixed. Jared smiled today. Thanks." And I realized nobody had thanked me in months. We went for coffee, then dinner. Then suddenly it was real. Jared didn't care at first. He actually seemed happier. He started turning in work. He stopped acting like he hated the world. Then his aunt found out. She marched into the school, demanded the principal, and declared I was taking advantage of Pete because he was simple. She called me a gold digger, a homewrecker, a predator. Pick a label, she used it. The school panicked. They didn't ask Jared if he felt safe. They didn't ask Pete if he felt coerced. They asked me if I understood optics. I said, "So the optics matter more than the kid who's finally improving?" The principal didn't answer. He just handed me paperwork. They fired me, and the official reason was so vague it could apply to anything. Loss of community trust. 2 weeks later, Jared's aunt got temporary custody. Pete relapsed. Jared stopped coming to school. I used to think being fired was my punishment. Now I know the punishment was watching a kid fall apart because adults cared more about gossip than support. Story 10. I didn't get fired because I dated a dad. I got fired because I said no when the school wanted me to lie. My student was Kira. Sharp, sarcastic, always first to notice hypocrisy. Her dad, Adrian, was the quiet type. He'd come to conferences with notes and ask questions like he actually wanted to learn how to parent better. One day, Kira's mom didn't show up to pick her up. 2 hours passed. Kira was sitting on the bench outside my classroom, pretending she didn't care, but her mascara was streaking. I called Adrian. He arrived in 10 minutes, out of breath. He thanked me so many times it made my throat tight. After that, he'd check in. Not in a creepy way, just consistent. He was consistency in a world that loved chaos. We started dating after Kira begged me, "Please keep being around." My mom disappears for days and my dad tries so hard. I told her, "Your dad and I are adults. This isn't your responsibility." She said, "I know. I just don't want him to be alone." We were careful. We kept it private. But Kira's mom found out and went nuclear. She accused me of brainwashing Kira to hate her. She emailed the district, the superintendent, the local Facebook group, and apparently half the planet. The principal called me in and said, "We can make this go away if you resign quietly." I said, "I didn't break policy." He leaned forward. "Just say you understand it was inappropriate and step down." I realized what he wanted. A confession. Something they could wave around and say, "See? We handled it." I said, "No, I won't admit to something I didn't do." His face hardened. "Then we'll have to terminate." They fired me that afternoon. A week later, I got a message from Kira on an old class email chain. "My mom says you ruined her life, but you're the only adult who didn't lie. Thank you." I stared at that email for a long time, feeling equal parts proud and sick. Because I lost my career in that school not for dating, but for refusing to become their convenient villain. Story 11. I was the new music teacher, still trying to prove I belonged, when I met Owen's dad at the winter concert. He stayed after everyone left, stacking chairs with the custodian like he didn't want to go home. He joked, "If I linger long enough, maybe my apartment magically turns into a house." I laughed, then immediately regretted it. Because he looked at me like I'd just handed him a life raft. We started talking about Owen. Owen was brilliant but angry, always slamming his locker like it owed him money. His dad said, "He thinks I ruined his life by leaving his mom." I said, "Kids don't understand adult pain. They just feel the aftershocks." That's how our conversations became regular. We'd talk after rehearsals, then over coffee. Then one night he asked, "Are you always this kind, or am I just starving for it?" I told him I couldn't date a student's parent. He said, "I get it." 2 weeks later, Owen transferred to a different class schedule for unrelated reasons, and suddenly my brain went, technically, we dated quietly. No school events together, no public photos. I thought it was safe. It wasn't Owen who blew it up. It was Owen's mom. She showed up at school with a binder. A literal binder. Inside, printed texts, blurry photos from a distance, and a handwritten timeline titled, "The Truth." She handed it to the principal like she was delivering evidence to a courtroom. The principal called me in, face pale. "We need you to help us manage this." "Manage how?" I asked. "Say it never happened," he said. I stared. "So you want me to lie?" He sighed. "We're trying to protect Owen." That was the line they always used when they meant protect the school. I refused. HR called it uncooperative. 2 days later, I was fired for dishonesty and unprofessional conduct. Dishonesty, because I wouldn't lie. The final gut punch? Owen cornered me in the hallway the day I was packing my desk. He whispered, "My mom said you were the reason my dad doesn't love her anymore." I swallowed hard. "Owen, your dad made his choices." Owen's eyes filled. "Then why do I feel like it's my fault you're leaving?" I didn't have an answer that wouldn't break him. So I just said, "It's not, and you're going to be okay." Then I walked out with my music books, and his song followed me down the hall like a funeral. Story 12. I didn't even like the dad. That's the part nobody believes. I taught chemistry. His name was Grant, and he was my student Lacey's dad. Loud, charming, the type who called everyone kiddo. He flirted with half the PTA and acted like the school was his personal stage. Lacey, though, was sweet. She stayed after for tutoring. She trusted me. She once told me, "You're the only adult who doesn't treat me like a problem." Then her mom got arrested. Overnight, Lacey became a kid with a duffel bag and no plan. Grant showed up in my classroom late, eyes glassy, and asked, "Can you watch her for an hour? I just need to figure out everything." I should have sent him to admin. I should have done everything by the book. Instead, I said yes, because Lacey was sitting there silently crying, and the book didn't have a chapter for that. Grant started leaning on me. He'd call to ask what Lacey should eat when she refused dinner. He'd text at 2 a.m. "She's shaking. What do I do?" One night I snapped, "Grant, you need a therapist, not a teacher," he said quietly. "I think I need someone who doesn't think I'm a joke." And something shifted. Not attraction, responsibility. Two people under pressure making stupid human choices. We started seeing each other, in secret, because I knew how it looked. Lacey found out and smiled. "Good," she said. "Maybe you'll stay." That sentence terrified me. I tried to step back, but Grant begged, "Don't abandon her too." Then the school found out. Not through Lacey, through a colleague who saw Grant's car outside my apartment and decided she was the morality police. HR called me in and asked if I'd used my position to gain access to a vulnerable family. I laughed, then realized they weren't joking. I said, "I helped a child in crisis." HR said, "And now you're personally involved, which compromises everything." They fired me. Grant's reputation survived. Mine didn't. Months later, Lacey emailed me from a new address. "I'm living with my aunt now. Dad says he ruined your life." "I'm sorry." I stared at the screen and realized what my job had taught me. When a kid's world collapses, the adults build scapegoats instead of shelters. Story 13. At my school, the parents ran everything. Not officially, just the way a storm runs the sky. One of those parents was Danielle's dad, Mr. Patel. He was on the school board, donated new laptops, and had the kind of smile that made principals nervous. Danielle was brilliant and anxious, always overachieving like her worth depended on it. Her dad would email me at midnight about her grades like we were in a business deal. At first, I hated him. Then one day he showed up to a conference alone and said quietly, "Her mother is sick. I'm trying to hold this together." That softened me. We started talking like humans instead of enemies. He'd ask how to support Danielle without crushing her. I'd answer. He'd listen. One night after a fundraiser, we ended up outside in the cold, both too tired to perform. He said, "I'm so tired of being strong." And I said, "Me too." We kissed once. I pulled away and said, "This is a mistake." He nodded. "Then let's stop." We didn't stop. Here's the twist. He didn't get me fired because he regretted it. He got me fired because I ended it. When his wife's health stabilized, he panicked. He asked me to keep it quiet forever. I said, "I can't be your secret." The next week, the principal called me in. A concern has been raised about an inappropriate relationship with a parent. I knew immediately. Because the complaint was too clean, too professional, like it had been written by someone who understood policy language. I said, "You're kidding." The principal avoided my eyes. "We have to act." They fired me fast, before word reached the community. A silent execution. The kind that keeps donors happy. Danielle stopped me in the hallway on my last day and asked, "Did I do something wrong?" I wanted to scream her father's name. I wanted to burn the whole system down. Instead, I smiled and lied. "No, sweetheart. This has nothing to do with you." And that's the cruelest part. I protected the person who destroyed me, because the child didn't deserve to carry the truth. Story 14. I teach special education. That means half my job is paperwork and the other half is being a human shield. My student was Ben. Loud, impulsive, hilarious. His dad, Corey, was the exhausted kind of single parent who looked like he hadn't slept since 2019. He showed up to every meeting, even when he was late, even when he looked embarrassed. One day, Ben had a meltdown so intense we had to clear the hallway. Corey arrived, hugged his son, and whispered, "I'm here." Ben collapsed like his body finally believed it. Afterward, Corey stayed behind and said, "Thank you for not giving up on him." Nobody thanked me. Not like that. We started talking after school, then texting about Ben's routines, then talking about our lives by accident. He told me how Ben's mom walked out. I told him I'd been burned by someone who said they loved me and left anyway. We started dating, carefully, quietly. I promised myself, Ben comes first. Ben found out and did the most Ben thing ever. He announced it in the cafeteria. My dad and Ms. Lane are in love, he yelled, standing on a bench like a tiny town crier. The lunchroom exploded. Kids laughed. Teachers froze. Someone dropped a tray. I wanted to die on the spot. Corey apologized so hard he looked ill. He doesn't understand privacy. I said, "I know, but privacy didn't matter anymore." The story had legs. Parents complained. Not because Ben was unsafe, but because they didn't like a teacher being involved. Like I was a stain. HR called me in. I explained everything. I said Ben had support plans. I said I'd stepped back from direct contact with Corey on school grounds. I said I'd do whatever safeguards they wanted. HR said, "This is still a conflict of interest." Then the principal added, "And the publicity is disruptive." Disruptive. Because a child with disabilities said something innocent in a loud voice. They fired me. Ben cried when he saw me leaving. He clung to my cardigan and sobbed. "Did I get you in trouble?" I knelt down and said, "No, you didn't do anything wrong." But inside I was furious, because he was the only one who told the truth without shame. Story 15. The firing wasn't dramatic. No yelling, no escort. Just a calendar invite titled "Check-in" that turned into a career funeral. I taught history. My student was Ava, and she was the kind of kid who acted unbothered while secretly memorizing every adult's mood. Her dad, Simon, came to conferences with a notebook full of questions. He didn't flirt. He didn't linger. He was just present. Ava's mom wasn't around much, and Ava would pretend that was fine. One day, Ava stayed after class and asked, "Do you think people leave because they hate you? Or because they're weak?" I didn't know what to say, so I said the truth. Sometimes people leave because they can't face the damage they've caused. Ava nodded like that was the answer to a riddle. A week later, her dad emailed, "Thank you for what you said to Ava." She repeated it, and it helped. We started talking. Then meeting. Then dating quietly. I told myself it was safe because Ava seemed calmer. Her grades improved. She smiled more. Then Ava's mom returned. Suddenly, loudly, like a storm coming back for what it left behind. She showed up at school screaming that I was trying to steal her family. She claimed I turned Ava against her. She demanded my firing in front of the office like it was a performance. The principal looked terrified, not of what was true, but of what was loud. At my check-in, HR said, "We're concerned your relationship has influenced the student." I said, "The student is doing better." HR said, "That's not the point." They offered me a resignation with a reference, or termination without one. A choice that wasn't a choice. I refused to resign on principle. I thought truth mattered. They fired me anyway. That night, Ava texted me from her dad's phone. "Mom says you're the reason she's sad." But I'm not sad. I'm finally safe. I stared at those words and realized something ugly. Schools don't always protect kids. They protect quiet. They protect comfort. And if you make an adult uncomfortable, even by loving someone, you become disposable. Story 16. I'm a male literature teacher in a conservative district where the values poster is bigger than the library. I met Tyler's dad, Evan, when he came in for a conference wearing a suit that still had the dry clean tag on it. Nervous, polite, and clearly trying. Tyler had been acting out hard. Late, sarcastic, always pushing buttons. Evan didn't excuse it. He just sighed and said, "I think he hates me for being me." We started talking after meetings. At first, it was strictly about Tyler. Then it turned into long texts about parenting, grief, and how it feels to be judged in a room before you even speak. Evan was recently divorced, quietly out, and I was lonely in a way I'd pretended didn't exist. We met for coffee outside town. No hand-holding, no photos. Just two adults breathing for the first time in months. Tyler found out when he saw Evan's name light up on my phone during independent reading. He didn't explode. He went dead quiet, then asked, "Are you dating my dad?" I said, "I'm not here to hurt you." He swallowed like he was swallowing glass. "You're going to make everyone talk." He was right. Within a week, there were whispers in the hallway, then emails, then a concerned parent petition about predatory influence. I got called into the superintendent's office. Superintendent, not principal. That's how fast it traveled. The superintendent slid a printed screenshot across the desk. A selfie of Evan and me, blurred, clearly taken from across a parking lot. Under it, "Teacher dating student's dad." Disgusting. "I haven't violated policy," I said, hands shaking. "Tyler is safe. My classroom is safe." The superintendent didn't argue. He just said, "We can't have controversy. Controversy isn't misconduct." He leaned in like he was being kind. "Resign, and we'll call it mutual." I refused. They fired me the next day for community disruption. Not performance. Not ethics. Not boundaries. Just the fact that people were loud. Tyler caught me loading books into my car and whispered, "My dad's crying." I looked at him and said, "This isn't your fault." He nodded once like a grown man trapped in a teenager's body and said, "They didn't fire you because you're a bad teacher. They fired you because you made them look at themselves." Then he walked away, and I realized the district had found the easiest solution. Delete the person who made their values complicated. Story 17. I dated the dad after I tried to do everything right. His name was Shane, and he was my student Brooke's father. He came to every event, always smiling, always bringing donuts like bribery. He was charming in that dangerous way, like he could talk you into forgiving him for things you hadn't even discovered yet. Brooke adored him, and also feared disappointing him. She'd panic if she got a B. "I noticed it," asked the counselor, got shrugged at. So when Shane asked for a meeting, I agreed, because I cared about the kid. He showed up alone and said, "Brooke's mom is spiraling. I'm trying to keep Brooke stable." I believed him. That's on me. We started talking more, then texting. Then he asked me out. I said no, twice. The third time he admitted quietly, "I'm separated. I'm sleeping on my brother's couch." I still said, "Not while she's in your daughter's class." So I moved Brooke to another teacher's roster. Officially, scheduling needs. Unofficially, me trying to avoid exactly what happened next. Shane and I started dating. Quietly. Boringly. Honestly. It lasted 3 weeks before Brooke's mom found out and decided to burn down every room we'd ever been in. She didn't go to the principal. She went to Facebook, posted my staff photo with the caption, "This woman stole my husband and now teaches your children." Parents tagged each other. Screenshots spread. Someone emailed the school board a link. The next morning, I walked into my classroom and every kid was staring at me like I had a second head. By second period, the principal called me in. He wouldn't sit down. "We're getting calls," he said. "A lot of calls. I didn't do anything illegal." He pinched his lips. "It doesn't matter. The community is upset." Then HR said the phrase that still makes my skin crawl. "We have to consider student perception." Brooke came into class later and whispered, "My mom says you're a homewrecker." Is that true? My throat tightened. "No, Brooke." She looked relieved for exactly 1 second. Then she said, if you don't get fired, she'll make sure my dad never sees me again." And that's when I understood. This wasn't about ethics. It was leverage. They fired me at the end of the day. No investigation. Just a termination letter and a security escort like I was dangerous. As I walked out, my phone buzzed. "Shane, I'm so sorry. She's threatening to go to the news." I stared at the message and realized my career was collateral in a custody war. I didn't even text back. I just kept walking, because the school had made their decision. The loudest parent gets to write the truth. Story 18. My charter school had a morality clause. That should have been my warning label. I met my student Rachel's dad at an open house. Liam was handsome, smooth, and, most importantly, on the board. He laughed at my jokes too hard, asked about my goals, told me I was wasted in a classroom like it was a compliment. We didn't date right away. We talked. Then we talked too much. Then one night, after a board meeting, he said, "I'm tired of being the responsible guy everyone uses." I said, "Welcome to teaching." We started seeing each other in secret. No school functions, no posts. I thought the biggest risk was gossip. The real risk was power. A month in, Liam texted, "Rachel needs an A. She's applying to a program. Help me out." I called him immediately. "Absolutely not," he laughed. "Come on, I'm not asking you to forge anything. Just be generous." "Liam," I said, voice shaking, "this is a line." The next day, I got called into the headmaster's office. 2 board members were there. Liam wasn't. They slid a document across the desk titled, "Violation of Professional Standards." Inside were screenshots of my texts, cherry-picked, stripped of context, making it look like I'd been flirting with Liam to gain influence, like I was the one using him. I stared at the page. "This is retaliation," the headmaster sighed. "Regardless, your relationship with a board member is a conflict. Then why didn't anyone care until I refused to change a grade?" Silence. The kind that answers you. They offered me a resignation. I refused. They fired me and cited the morality clause because it was vague enough to swallow anything. That evening, Liam finally called. I didn't want it to go this far. I laughed. Actually laughed. Because what else do you do when someone lights your life on fire and says they didn't mean for it to spread? "You used me," I said. "And the school let you," he whispered. "I'm sorry." I hung up and opened my email. The termination notice was already circulating to staff. Not my name, just a teacher was removed. Like I was a stain they'd scrubbed off quietly. The next week, Rachel saw me at the grocery store and said, "Did you get fired because of my dad?" I looked at her and realized the only honest answer would destroy her. So I said, "No, it wasn't you," and I walked away with my cart shaking, because I'd just protected the people who didn't protect me. Story 19. I wasn't even a full-time teacher. I was a long-term sub covering maternity leave, which means you're disposable from day one. I met Nolan's dad when he picked him up late. Again. And Nolan was sitting in my room pretending not to care. His dad, Derek, showed up in scrubs, hair a mess, apologizing like he wanted to crawl under the floor. "I'm a nurse," he said. "Double shift." "I hate that he's always last," Nolan shrugged. But his eyes did that thing kids' eyes do when they've made peace with disappointment. That bothered me more than the lateness. Derek started messaging me through the school portal about homework, then tutoring, then Nolan's mood. It was all so earnest, so unflirty it felt safe. Then one day he said, "Can I buy you dinner as a thank you?" I said no. Then yes, because I'm human and I was tired of eating cereal alone. We kept it quiet. We also kept it normal. No drama. Until Nolan decided he liked it a little too much. He started testing, "So are you my stepmom now?" He'd joke in class. "Do I get extra credit because you're dating my dad?" I shut it down hard. Absolutely not. The next day, Nolan told his friends I was playing favorites. A week later, his friends told their parents. A week after that, a parent emailed the principal. "This substitute is grooming the class by getting close to families." Grooming. Over dinner with an adult. The word hit like a brick. The principal called me in and said, "As a substitute, we can end your placement at any time, so you're firing me." He shrugged like it was weather. "We're protecting the school." I begged for a chance to explain. He said, "It's not about you. It's about perception." I walked out and found Nolan in the hall. He grinned like he'd won something. Then his face faltered when he saw my box of classroom supplies. "Wait," he said, "you're leaving?" "Yes." He blinked, suddenly small. I didn't think they'd actually do it. That's when I realized the sickest part. Nolan didn't hate me. He'd just discovered he could pull a lever and watch adults panic. That night, Derek called furious. "I'll talk to them." "Don't," I said. "They already chose the story they like." 2 days later, my substitute account was deactivated. No goodbye. No closure. Just gone. And Nolan? He got a new sub by Monday. The school moved on like I'd never existed, which, as a long-term sub, was probably the most honest part of the whole thing.